another approach that I often see is people will handle Ephesians 5 by emphasizing the sacrificial aspect of headship. And you see that even, I believe, in the gospel reading, uh, you're allowed to bracket out the part about what women are supposed to do in that passage. I think in the official liturgy, you're allowed to leave that part out, which could really end up giving the impression that men have duties and obligations and women do not, which is kind of an absurd, bizarre situation to create. So you could say, yes, well, how do you define headship? Headship is a giver. Headship is he's a sacrificer. But or it's servant headship, right? But you can't do that in a way that would lose the paradoxical element of it, because a head is not merely a servant. In other words, a husband does not exercise his authority by acting literally like a servant would, where he takes no initiative and is just told what to do, you know. So there's still the need, as you say explicitly in the book, it still doesn't let us off the hook. Explaining headship in this way doesn't let us off the hook from explaining what submission means, what obedience means.
But on that note, in terms of sort of what a head looks like, right? One of the huge things that I talk about in the book is the element of risk. Okay, when you offer a gift to someone, you take a huge risk, right? A risk that it's going to be rejected, not received well, whatever, right? Honestly, for a man to say, you know, I just don't think that's good for our daughter, or I don't think this place to live is good for our family. You know, when they're coming, when it's a decision that's serving the family's good, and he is going to say, you know, I think I see this problem and I'm going to try to solve it, right? I'm going to make an effort to do X. It's a risk. It's a huge risk. And the thing is, are they always going to get it right? You know, there's going to, of course, you talk about things with your wife back and forth. You do trust each other. You listen to each other, and we got to work at doing that. But when it comes down to those times when we want fathers to be a man, step up, engage, lead this family, well, guess what? That's really risky, and it's hard. And sometimes he might not quite get it right. And that's precisely where our submission saves the unity of the family. Because the point is to try to preserve this unity. And so, no, there's no guarantee that a man is in his perfect logical nature and all of these things that he's going to always get it right, that every effort on behalf of the family, even if it is sacrificial, is going to sort of pan out the way he hoped, right? And so that's why I think it's really important to explore the elements of submission. What does that look like? Does it mean we always have to be happy with everything and never have a conversation with our husband about this or that isn't working? No. But one gift that women have that, again, I was really led to this through St. Teresa Benedicta, Edith Stein, is that because women have such a close, I hate to say relationship, but our bodies are always reminding us that we're women, okay, in a way that's constant, that our bodies almost reveal to us that we are women, and you don't see women running around trying to prove that they're women, okay, where you might see guys running around trying to prove that they're a guy and win this and do that and accomplish this. Women, basically, I'd say we identify with our bodies in a certain way. It's a way that can be dangerous. But what's good about it is when you look at men's bodies, though they are, you know, masculine in structure, they don't convince, you know, a 15-year-old boy that he's a man, right? He needs to get a sense of his manhood through what he does with that body. He tends to see his body as more of an instrument. So he tries to score that touchdown, win that debate, shoot that deer. He tries to accomplish something. And then when that thing that he does is recognized and appreciated, he feels appreciated, which means he identifies with his deeds, with his work, in a way that is distinct from a woman who tends to identify with her body. But what gift this gives women is it's easier for us to separate our love for my husband than for what he did. Okay, I can say, okay, so you failed at this. I still love you. You're still you. You're not defined by that failure. Okay? And we can say this to our kids. Okay, You failed that test, or you had this disappointment, or you did this big screw up. Women have a gift of being able to distinguish who a person is from what they do. Now, again, you can't take that distinction too far because that's dangerous. But I mean, it really is dangerous. You'll see mothers of death row inmates being like, "That's my baby. He didn't do it." We have to, but in the middle somewhere is a gift. And so because we can more easily sort of distance ourselves from, okay, maybe I don't think my husband's call in this situation, which I'm submitting to, is the best, but I'm going to get on board with it. And then he's not alone in it. And if it fails, he's not going to be crushed in it. I'm there with him, and that's going to give him the support and the encouragement to get up and do it all over again tomorrow, because that is the risk that the giver takes. When you give and that thing is not received, you're crushed by it. Okay, a man identifies more with his deeds. So what he's doing for his wife and family, if those things aren't received well, he feels that he's not being received well. So because we have this gift of being able to sort of distinguish him from what he does, that's a tremendous gift, and we have to employ that in our submission. And again, I gave an example of submitting in kind of a big way, where there's these big decisions that happen in family life, and that does not happen every day. I mean, I hope it doesn't happen every day. The little everyday submission of appreciating him and appreciating what he does and not sort of criticizing every little thing, that can be much harder for some women than the sort of occasional final say decision. But nonetheless, if we're going to ask him to be making these sacrifices and to be this big hero leader, we have to let him, and we have to get on board with it. And that, again, that is also not easy. And so I'm trying in the book to talk in, I hope, a way that is equally challenging / encouraging for husbands and wives, to try to look at the everyday ways in which they can do what they're called to do better. Because if they do, they're actually both going to feel more satisfied and more personally affirmed in the process.
A lot of people talk about headship as like something to be suspicious of, even talking about like Catholics would be, okay, yes, the husband is the head, but they wouldn't want to emphasize that all. They're uncomfortable talking about it. They're comfortable sort of embracing it or submitting to it, in the sense that if it's your vocation given to you by God as a husband and father, then it's something that actually requires your obedience. But you talked in the book about how a lot of husbands today are more inclined to abdicate that headship. And you gave a wonderful example, because I just finished rereading Pride and Prejudice for the first time since high school, which has just been a delight. But the character of Mr. Bennet, who basically, he has abdicated his headship, and he's also just sort of, it really connects with your discussion of headship as being a risk, because to a large extent what he's doing is insulating himself from the pain of having entered into an imprudent marriage,
Yes.
and from the silliness of his daughters and his wife. And he just sort of retreats, and he has a certain contempt for them, but nor is he, lording it over them either. He's not really exercising his authority properly at all. He's just sort of neglecting them and allowing them to do what they want, and it ends up in disaster. So I think he is a great example that you brought up in the book of the abdication of headship, and how that is connected with the unwillingness to be vulnerable and face risk, because we see both of those in him.
It is. It just, again, being married to an English professor is super fun, because he gave me another example last night that I wished I'd used in the book. But I'm telling you, it's even the physical way in which Mr. Bennet retreats to his study, right? It is a retreat. And that line, there will be no peace at Longbourn if we don't let Lydia go on this trip to Brighton. If we're always making decisions about peace, what will stop the complaints, what will stop the grumbling, that's not going to be, if that is what's motivating our decisions, ultimately it's going to motivate non-decisions. It's going to motivate retreat and not engaging, and ultimately abdicating. And then when things go south, it's not just the sadness that, oh, maybe he could have stopped that bad thing from happening, but what happens to that relationship? Husband and wife are driven further apart, even if, because again, if it's possible that Mr. Bennett could have stepped in and made an edict and said, no, you can't go. And maybe that daughter still would have gone off the deep end, right? But at least they would have known, he would have known that he spoke up, he stepped up, right? That, and so in terms of the marriage, so I was trying to look at what happens to the marriage when one refuses to take the risk. The wife is not fulfilled either. She thinks she's going to be happy when she gets what she wants, right? But ultimately, she's not getting a unified marriage because he's driven out of it. So there has to be. And so again, the flip side is, wow, if, in terms of the submission aspect, if dad really thinks strongly about something, maybe I need to listen. Maybe I do need to consider, and maybe I need to not always use my wiles, because again, women, we do have in a sense, a great power over our husband, but if it means he's actually just checking out because he doesn't want to deal with all the complaining and the grumbling, whether it be of the teenage daughters or the sons or the wife, right? Then that's a dangerous dynamic when he's no longer willing to take that risk.